Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 18 Glendale Housing Authority meeting being called to order at 2:53. And may we have your roll call, please?
Authority members.
Here.
Authority members. Draymond?
Here.
Friedman?
Here.
Mincy?
Here.
Najarian?
Here.
Weaver?
Here.
Chair Quintero? Vice Chair Parazian?
Here. May we have your report, please?
Certainly. The agenda for the May 18, 2010 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, May 13, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Do we have minutes?
Yes, we do.
So moved. Second.
Any corrections or objections?
None.
Hearing none, the minutes will stand approved as submitted. And what is next, please?
Oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for an investigation and report.
And I have one card, Herbert Milano. Would you come to the podium, Mr. Milano? Thank you. 5 minutes.
Good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Housing Authority Chair Pro Temp, I guess, Parazian, and members of the Housing Authority and city staff. My name is Herbert Milano. From time to time, I've come before you to request that we have a systematic way of evaluating the city programs, especially those under the purview of the Housing Authority. And I've come now for the last couple of years at least to request that we get the results of the quality of life indicators. Because I believe that that's the document that you could use to evaluate pretty much all of your city programs to see if they are improving our quality of life or the quality of life of all the stakeholders. And I want to present to you, I guess, a different way of looking at the importance of this document with an analogy. Imagine for a moment that you were to go to a store and buy some prepared foods, frozen prepared foods, and after you take it home, you find out that you and your family got sick. So you get the results of that particular transaction is afterwards, when you get the food poisoning. And you figure, wait a second, this doesn't work very well for us. We should really get it much earlier than that. So now imagine a process by which the quality of the product is tested at the time of the checkout. Well, it's a little bit of an improvement, but it's not quite what you would want. You want the check of the quality to be done well before that. And generally, that's what food companies do. They do it in process. Years ago, they used to use a process by which, for example, if you needed to check the temperature of the product, the actual product was actually tested. But from quite a few years now, they copied a process used by NASA called the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. What they do is they don't check the temperature of the actual item itself or the foodstuff. They check the controls that maintain the temperature. So they actually are checking the critical control points. And in a way, the quality of life indicators give us that. If we know, for example, that 4-year-old children are doing without proper care, it's an early indicator. If there's a large number of single-parent families, that's an early indicator. If a child arrives to school hungry, that's an early indicator. If a child is now exposed to a bad environment in his neighborhood, that's an early indicator. If a child does not do his homework, that's an early indicator. If the child gets in trouble, that's another early indicator. We have a series of early indicators that we are not really paying attention to as a city in a cohesive, programmatic way. We basically wait until that child doesn't finish high school, becomes a dropout, gets into the attention of the police department, says, okay, now we take the money and we'll give it to the police department or the legal system or the state prison system. You know, every single year, we have 120,000 people who reach the age of 20, 120 without a high school diploma. The cost to the state of California for each person that does not get a high school degree is $384,000. That's a humongous burden on the state budget. But then who takes care of it? Is it the county taking care of it? Is it the state taking care of it? who should take care of that monitoring, if not at the city level, where we are close to the problem and we can assess how it is that we are doing? And it is for that reason that I've been coming here for years to say, look, if you are judicious with the way you handle your budget, if you're really judicious with the way you maintain and control your cost, we will have the money to be able to put aside some money for the sustainability and the identification and the proactive things that we can do to resolve the problem locally. And that has been, in a nutshell, my advocacy for all of these years. It is my intent here to encourage the Housing Authority to produce on a yearly basis the quality of life indicators, because you really cannot run a city without it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I have no cards. So, is there any council members or staff comment? Well, what is next, please?
On the business agenda, at 6A is a presentation, Director of Community Redevelopment and Housing regarding housing programs and proposed budget for fiscal year 2010-2011.
Madam Chair, members of the Housing Authority, we are here today to present our 2010-2011 budget. Because you have dedicated time, we've decided to use this agenda, but we'll follow the same format as the other departments in talking to you about special funds and enterprise funds. So we'll be going over these items. We'll focus mainly on the projected budget per fund and talk about some challenges of each of those funds. In January of this year, we realigned some of our departments. Development Services became Community Redevelopment and Housing, and we've borrowed this mission statement from different sources just to give us some direction until we can come back to you with some more complete. But we really are using development to improve the quality of life in different avenues, in this particular case, residential development. Our core services in the Housing Department is Housing Development and Preservation. This is new construction and, as it says in its title, preservation. Then we have Housing Assistance, which is, for the most part, our Section 8 program. In the Development and Preservation Fund, we have a slight increase in our salaries and benefits. That is due to contractual benefits that for certain bargaining units, our M&O has gone down, and that is as a result of a reduced contract for our 5-year plan. In terms of revenues, we see just a bit of a dip from the, this is in our home funds, Fund 203, a bit of a dip in our revenues for that. That is what was allotted to us from the federal government. You'll see prior year funds of $20,000. That was a policy decision to take what could be used for administration and bank it. We are doing that, and we'll come back to you with ways to program those funds. They've started to accumulate, and it may be advantageous for us to use it. And then program income is from a project that we did some time ago where we were charging interest. Typically, projects now will need some form of assistance. This project could support interest, and so we have a small amount. Likewise, in our set-aside fund, we have a dip in salaries and benefits. Some of that is due to the cost allocation in ISD. The M&O that you see, the decrease of $4.2 million, that's because in 09-10 we had the loan from the state to help us with the Doran Gardens project. And so you see that reduction there. Then that capital is as well reduction of $1.5 million. That represents the Housing Authority's most recent project, Central City Lights on Salem. On our set-aside, this is 20% of the tax increment generated by the redevelopment agency is set aside for affordable housing. You see a dip in the revenues there as well. For property tax, that has to do with a dip that we experienced in our tax increment. Interest income, an increase of $200,000. We weren't expecting any last year. We did receive some, and so we've modified this year's budget to reflect that. Program income is from our first-time home buyers and rehab payback. And then you see the loan, the state loan there from last year that went to help fund Dorton Gardens. I should say that this set aside, the number that you see there, $4.1 million, is net of debt service. If you recall, we pay about $3 million to service debt on a loan from Union Bank that we took out a year and a half ago for a project, Vassar City Lights. We will be making this payment for another 4 years, and then that entire amount would go back to the set-aside fund. Some of the things that we're seeing, challenges we're seeing in housing development and preservation is funding. Our tax increment dipped a little bit. First time we've seen that in a long time. We expect to see a little bit more of that as we have appeals on property tax. The federal home funds have been relatively stable, but we did see a small dip, and there will be competition for those. The loan repayment is something we have to figure in 4 years, add $3 million to our funding. And then in terms of production trends, more competitive construction costs, more difficult to find land to develop, and the demand and need for affordable housing is not going down in the state of California or in Glendale. So those are some of the things we see, challenges we see. Of course, the state's take of local redevelopment funds, while not directly affecting it, is something we need to keep our eyes on. There is a provision that if an agency cannot pay that, it could borrow from its housing fund, which means less production of affordable housing. And then finally, on our programs and projects, we do have several projects in process, 72 units at Vassar City Lights. We have just over 100 units contemplated in 3 different projects that we're working on in various stages of entitlement. Housing rehab, we continue to work on. First-time home buyers, our rental assistance that's tied with job search and vocational training. So we do, while it is a challenge, we do have programs with a bright future for the Housing Authority. That is a quick run-through of housing and preservation, development and preservation. We also have our Section 8 program. Again, you'll see a slight dip in salaries and benefits. That has to do with some movement of staff, and that is the decrease. The maintenance and operation, you see the big jump there of $12 million. That is representative of the portable vouchers that we're taking in from other cities and then get reimbursed for. So the jump is represented there in about that. You see here, we gave you just a snapshot of the Section 8 program. The vouchers that are authorized by HUD is at the top. The next line is those that we actually fund. Portable vouchers coming in, majority from the city of Los Angeles at 1,400. And then we've given you some detail on the rest. Average incomes, people that we're serving, what we believe our calendar year costs are, both what we're allotted and what we're getting portable. We do have a waiting list of almost 6,500 people that has been constant for some time. We see in Section 8 some of our challenges with a weakening economy. There's more need for assistance. Declines in income are having a reverse trend on assistance needed. One of the things that we're seeing from HUD is, if you noticed in the last slide, we are authorized for 1,591 or 92, and we only fund 1,540. That's because we've been staying within the dollars allotted, and we're not oversubscribing. What we're seeing a trend is those cities that do fund right up to their allotment and dip into the reserves to fund that, they are getting additional funding from HUD to make up for that. So we're going to start looking at increasing the amount of vouchers that we do bring online and see if we can't generate some more funding from HUD. We won't get into a danger zone where we go too far into our reserves, but we want to see if we can maximize some more dollars from the federal government. And then finally, the portable vouchers, that 1,400 vouchers, the way the mechanics work on that is the voucher comes into Glendale, we use our reserves to fund that, and then it's reimbursed. It's a bit of a tracking and administrative challenge for us, but we think it is worthwhile to not only provide homes in Glendale, but then the revenue that comes along with it. The cities that are sending the voucher keep about 20%. We get 80% of that, and we can generally fund that for less. So we think it's a worthwhile exercise, even though it is a bit of a challenge. So with that, most of the housing staff is here. If you have any questions, we're available to answer them. If there are none, I would.
Well, I'm sorry. Wrong Laura.
Okay.
Vice Chair. Mr. Lansafame, just so the impression, so nobody gets the impression that with the Section 8 vouchers, we're making a profit on those. Is that what we're to take out of that?
It's not necessarily a profit, but we don't take a loss by bringing somebody a voucher from outside. We're actually able, we found that many of those people were Glendale residents that applied in Los Angeles, so now we're able to house Glendale residents in Glendale.
No, I understand all that. That's in how they work. I'm talking about the comment that 80% of that, and we can make use of that for less. That implies a profit. So, I'm going to ask Peter Zovak to walk through the mechanics on it. and then it was also characterized as revenue. So the reimbursement was characterized also as revenue during the presentation. I just want a clarification.
There are two types of funding we receive through our portability program. Other agencies sending Section 8 clients to Glendale. HAP revenue, so housing assistance payments made directly to landlords, and those are paid typically a month to 2 months after we forward that payment on their behalf. And then the admin revenue, of which Mr. Lansafame indicated, the original agency gets to keep 20% of the admin revenue that is tied to that voucher, and then they transmit the remaining 80% to the agency that receives the port. We are at a point with staff in being efficient and being able to process and handle such a high caseload that typically in both the HAP account and the admin account, in the past few years we've been able to maintain a surplus at the end of the fiscal year that then gets deposited into our reserve accounts.
Do you know what that figure is?
It could average, I believe, last year's HAP reserve or admin funding that went into our reserve, approximately $100,000, $150,000. It's not a large amount, but certainly an achievement in today's environment.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any more comments? Any more
I
comments?
have one more comment. I neglected to, on the set-aside and home funds, any projects, any dollars that aren't expended in that year for project, we'd like to roll over into the next year, and this budget takes that into account.
Okay. I do have a card from the public. Mr. Milano. 3 minutes, Mr. Milano. If you need more time, we...
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. Thanks, Ms. President and members of the Housing Authority. My name is Herbert Milano. One of the things that I like about this particular presentation today is that, in a way, we have a little bit of a snapshot of the the way the funding is distributed and who benefits from it. The report we saw here with regard to the number of Section 8 vouchers is an excellent one. The annual income of the people receiving those vouchers. This summary is more or less along the lines of the things that the public should get with regard to tying in your overall budget, with the benefits on the same document. What I would love to see is a budget being presented in a little bit more robust way. And you already have an example of that with in the 2009 budget, you do have appropriations by department, by fund, nice and neat, and it clearly tells you pretty much, how the funding is being allocated to each department. But I think we could still do a lot better if you were to put in and break it down some way as you used to in the budget summary with salaries, benefits, M&O, capital expenditures. And imagine a spreadsheet where you have these numbers year to year. Year 2000, 2001, 2002. This way you could see across the board, year to year, how salaries have changed, how benefits have changed. So you can get a better assessment of the performance of the department. But those by themselves will not going to do a lot of good unless you're able to look at what has been the burden on that department with regard to the activity. So you need to have both. You need to see the expenditures on the one hand and the activities on the other to basically get a sense of the burden that this department has to carry and how much basically you're paying for it. I think that we need to know additional information, especially with regard to the number of applications on the current waiting list. At one point in time, I remember the waiting list was close to 10,000 people, but the waiting list was closed. If we were to know what is the gap or the individuals who would want to be on the list and can't, we would have a better assessment of the actual need in Glendale of the families that need housing assistance. And one last item that I would love to see is, on a year-to-year basis, how many additional housing units have been provided through all this investment from HUD, and how much is the cost per family to carry that burden. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What is next, please?
Next is authority member or staff comments.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We'll adjourn at 3:15. Thank you.
Okay. Artie, let's do our famous joint meeting.
One moment, Mr. Mayor.